Were our ancestors really cannibals? It sounds like a question from a horror story, but it is not just a horror story. It is a real question from archaeology, anthropology, history, and human survival. For years, people have asked whether ancient humans ate each other. Were they monsters? Were they starving? Was it ritual? Was it war? Or have we misunderstood the evidence? Today, when we hear the word cannibal, we immediately imagine something evil, something savage, something outside normal humanity. But the real story is more complicated than that. Cannibalism is one of the deepest taboos in human life. It is not just eating. It is eating someone who was like you, someone with a face, a name, a family, a place in the human world. So before we ask whether our ancestors were cannibals, we need to ask something simpler. What is cannibalism, and why does it disturb us so deeply? Cannibalism means a human being consuming human flesh. The older word is anthropophagy, but the definition alone does not explain the meaning, because cannibalism has never been only one thing. Sometimes it appeared during extreme hunger. Sometimes it was connected to funeral rituals. Sometimes it was linked to war or revenge. Sometimes it spread disease. And sometimes accusations of cannibalism were exaggerated to make other people look less human. So when people ask, were ancient humans really cannibals? The answer is not simply yes or no. The better answer is sometimes yes, but not always in the way people imagine. Archaeologists do not just guess. They look for evidence. Cut marks on bones. Skulls opened in specific ways. Long bones broken for marrow. Burning marks. Patterns similar to animal butchery. When human remains are processed in the same way as hunted animals, researchers begin to ask a difficult question. Was this body treated as food? Was it ritual? Was it violence? Or was something else happening? Bones can show what happened to a body, but bones cannot always tell us why. The marks may reveal action, but the motive is harder to recover. The easiest explanation is hunger. And sometimes hunger really was the answer. When food disappears, the human body begins to change. And when the body changes, the mind follows. Hunger does not only empty the stomach, it narrows the future. It makes tomorrow feel far away. It turns every decision into one question. How do I survive the next few hours? When people are well fed, morality feels solid. The line is clear. This is right. This is wrong. This is human. This is unthinkable. But in starvation, the line can begin to move. Not because people instantly become evil, but because survival starts negotiating with every belief they once had. One powerful historical example is Jamestown. During the winter of 1609 to 1610, the English colony entered what became known as the starving time. Food collapsed, disease spread, death surrounded the settlement. Smithsonian forensic research later found evidence that some colonists turned to survival cannibalism. This was not ritual. It was not celebration. It was desperation. A terrible response to a terrible situation. And this matters because Jamestown was not some distant tribe used to scare people. These were colonists. People with religion, laws, names, families, a belief that they were civilized. That is what makes the story uncomfortable. It shows that civilization is not just manners. It is also food, order, safety, trust, and systems that keep people from collapsing into desperation. But hunger does not explain everything. Because one researcher asked a strange question: if ancient humans ate humans for food, was it even worth it? James Cole's research estimated the nutritional value of the human body. He compared it with animals available in prehistoric environments. And the idea was simple. Humans were not always the best food source. Large animals could provide more meat, more fat, more calories, more reward for the risk. So if cannibalism happened, it may not always have been only about filling the stomach. That means we need to look at other reasons. Because cannibalism could be survival, but it could also be ritual. It could be punishment. It could be revenge. It could be a belief about death, power, or the soul. In some cultures, cannibalism was connected to mourning. This is called endocannibalism. It means consuming someone from within the group. Not an enemy, not a stranger, but one of your own. To us, that may sound horrifying, but in some belief systems, the meaning was different. It could be seen as keeping the dead close, returning them to the community, refusing to abandon them completely. This does not mean we have to agree with it, but if we want to understand history, we must first understand that not every society gives the body the same meaning. One of the most studied examples involved the Fore people of Papua New Guinea. There, mortuary cannibalism was connected to the spread of kuru, a deadly brain disease. Kuru is a prion disease. It is caused by misfolded proteins that damage the brain. At the time, people could not see this danger. They did not know an invisible disease could be carried through the body. And that teaches us something important. A practice can have meaning inside a culture and still have consequences that the people did not understand. There was also another kind of cannibalism, exo-cannibalism. This means consuming someone outside the group, an enemy, a rival, a captured outsider. Here, the meaning could be very different. It could be revenge, humiliation, a message to enemies, or a belief that the strength of the enemy could be taken. But this is where we must be extremely careful, because cannibalism was not only something people did, it was also something people were accused of. For centuries, explorers, enemies, and colonizers accused other groups of cannibalism. Sometimes the accusations were true, sometimes they were exaggerated, and sometimes they were used to make people seem less human. Because once you call a group cannibals, you do not have to understand them. You do not have to respect their land. You do not have to listen to their story. You can treat them like monsters. This is why anthropologists became more cautious. William Ahrens famously argued that many cannibal stories were poorly proven or shaped by colonial imagination. Not everyone agreed with him, but his warning still matters. A responsible question is not just, did cannibalism happen? A better question is, what evidence do we have? What context was it in? And who is telling the story? Today, cannibalism is almost universally treated as horrifying. In most modern societies, it is associated with crime, mental illness, war crimes, abuse, or extreme survival situations. It is no longer viewed as an acceptable cultural practice. Modern science also sees it as dangerous. There are medical risks, there are legal consequences, there are moral boundaries, and there is the deep psychological shock of turning a human body into food. Because to most people today, a human body is not just matter. It carries identity, memory, family, dignity. A person does not stop mattering simply because they have died. So were our ancestors really cannibals? The honest answer is yes, sometimes, but not always for the same reason. And not always in the way movies make it seem. Sometimes it was hunger. Sometimes it was grief. Sometimes it was war. Sometimes it was belief. Sometimes the evidence is strong. Sometimes the story is uncertain. And that is the real lesson. Cannibalism is not just a story about ancient people. It is a story about what happens when human beings are pushed to the edge. It shows us how important food is, not just for the body, but for morality, for peace, for dignity, for the ability to remain fully human. Maybe this is why human communities matter so much, because alone, survival can become terrifying. But together, humans can protect each other from the moments when desperation becomes too heavy. The taboo exists for a reason. It protects the dead. It protects the living. It protects the meaning of the human body. And it protects us from becoming numb to each other. So when we look at ancient bones, we should not only ask, did they eat each other? We should ask, what world were they living in? What did they believe? What were they facing? Because the easiest thing is to call them monsters. The harder thing is to understand that they were human, hungry humans, grieving humans, fearful humans, believing humans. And maybe that is why this question still disturbs us. Not because it proves our ancestors were less human, but because it proves they were human enough to frighten us. They crossed lines we hope we never cross. They faced conditions we hope we never face. And they left behind evidence that forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about survival, culture, and morality. So were our ancestors really cannibals? Sometimes yes, But the deeper truth is this: cannibalism was not one story. It was many stories of hunger, of ritual, of fear, of power, of misunderstanding, and of the fragile line between survival and the unthinkable.